Hello my friends and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 character building guide. Hope you're all doing well. I've got a really good one for you today. This is going to be a really fun one because you've seen many times me try to build the best character in Baldur's Gate. Well, today we're going to try to build the worst character. That's right, the goal here is to build the worst possible character in Baldur's Gate 3. The character where if you follow this build guide, it will be as difficult as possible to win with this character, even if you then subsequently try to play well. There's a lot actually that goes into this build, and honestly it was more fun to put together than I was expecting, and led to some more interesting things than I was expecting, because when you're trying to build the worst possible character, a lot of things that you wouldn't expect to change the power of your character do, and so our picks are actually really interestingly constrained, so this ends up being a really fun design challenge for the build. I'm using Halsin here as the example character because he takes himself very seriously, and that's funny to me. But I think probably you would not pick Wood Elf if you were going to build this character from scratch, because the bonus movement speed is really good, even on the worst possible character. But which race we pick is actually kind of interesting. There's a couple different options, but I think probably the best one would be Copper Dragonborn, or the worst one, because they give you no weapon and armor proficiencies, and also the breath weapon scales off your constitution, which is going to be, of course, as low as possible, and the acid damage resistance is the least relevant of the resistances. We would really like to be able to use a 25-foot move speed race, but unfortunately we can't, because all their bonuses are just way too good. Halfling's ability to reroll ones is just too powerful. Gnome's advantage on saving throws is too powerful for a character where we're trying to reduce the saving throws as much as possible. And all the various dwarves get weapon and armor proficiencies, which we're trying not to have, as well as shield dwarves get medium armor, and gold dwarves, which don't get armor proficiencies, get bonus hit points, which actually increases the final hit point total of this build by like 50% if you have the bonus hit points from gold dwarf, making it vastly more survivable than it would be otherwise. So I think your best bet is to get 30-foot movement speed and go with Copper Dragonborn, but it's possible there's some other options. Definitely sound off in the comments if you think there are any better choices for making our character as weak as possible. What class we pick is also really interesting. So to reduce our hit points as much as possible, we should be going with Sorcerer or Wizard, both of whom get 6 hit points at first level and gain only 4 hit points per level every level thereafter. However, Sorcerer and Wizard, of course, get spells, and spells are really, really good. So even though they're the best at reducing our hit points as much as possible, they come with spells. Wizard has the added problem that you can learn spells from scrolls if you are playing a wizard, and which means that as you play through the character, you're going to have lots of options to improve the character, something that we definitely want to avoid. On the other hand, other classes have better hit point totals and also get like weapon and armor proficiencies that we really want to avoid if we're trying to make our character as hard as possible to play. And so I think that our best pick, funnily enough, is actually going to be Sorcerer. Despite Sorcerer, let's click on the right one. Despite Sorcerer being in many ways probably the best class in Baldur's Gate, I think that the fact that sorcerers are limited to a small selection of specific spells that they pick, and the fact that they only get dagger, quarterstaff, and light crossbow proficiency means that sorcerers are going to have the least weapon access and also the lowest hit points of any character, and if we select their spells appropriately, they will not be able to cast any relevant combat spells, making the character as bad as possible. So for our pick for the worst possible race class combination, I think that you would want to go with a Copper Dragonborn Sorcerer, with the caveat that that's only so bad if you are trying to make it bad. Obviously, that's still a great character if you're trying to make it good. Which subclass of Sorcerer we pick is actually also kind of interesting. So the natural pick, of course, is Wild Magic, because Wild Magic is quite dangerous to cast, and is often considered more difficult just because of the randomness. But Wild Magic lets you turn combat spells or non-combat spells into combat spells if you get lucky on the wild magic surges. On the other hand, Draconic Bloodline gives us a significantly higher armor class, which we will be reducing as much as possible. So our armor class will be definitely less than 13, and so Draconic Bloodline's pretty good there, and gives us the bonus hit points. I mentioned when talking about Gold Dwarf that this would be a huge proportion of our bonus hit points, so we don't really want to take Draconic Sorcerer. And Storm Sorcerer is just too good. Tempestuous Magic makes you too survivable. We can't have that, so I think we will still go with Wild Magic, even though Tides of Chaos is a pretty powerful ability. Hopefully our skills and attacks will be so bad that even advantage won't save them, and of course this character will never be able to defeat a Cambion in combat, so if you summon one from a Wild Magic Surge, you'll definitely die, so that should mitigate any of the upsides that you might get from the advantageous wild magic surges, the fact that the negative ones are really bad for you. Even just the ones that like set you and surrounding creatures on fire is really dangerous because our hit points will be so low at the end of this build that the 1d4 fire per turn can often be instantly lethal. For our ability selection, we are going to try to make the worst ability spread possible, so let's clear this. Obviously, we need to start with the lowest possible charisma, because we're a sorcerer, so we don't want to be good at casting our spells. And we'd like to reduce dexterity, constitution, and wisdom as much as possible as well. Dexterity we need to get as low as possible, so we always lose initiative and have the lowest possible AC, and also dex saves are important. Con, of course, we need to minimize in order to minimize our hit points, and wisdom we need to minimize to have the lowest possible wisdom save, which is one of the important saves. Unfortunately, we can't get all 4 of those abilities to be super low, so we're going to have to pick one to increase, and that one's going to be wisdom. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the +2 in intelligence and max that out as quickly as possible. Then we're going to take 9s in strength and dexterity. Notice all the odd numbers, because we love odd numbers here. Or 9s in con and dexterity. We'll go up to 15 strength because at least, while unfortunately that does give us the option to attack with weapons, at least we don't have any good weapons to attack with because we're not proficient in too many weapons. And then finally we're going to take also 15 wisdom, because that's the least damaging to our goal of being as bad as possible. We definitely need 9s in dex and con, and we need 8 in charisma, because we need that as low as possible as well. We also don't want to be able to make dialogue checks, because that would make us useful to the party, so we need to have our charisma be as bad as possible. For our skill selection, we're going to take probably Arcana and Religion of the sorcerer skills available. For your background, you're going to want to take Folk Hero, because that gives you Survival and Animal Handling, the 2 most worthless skills in Baldur's Gate 3. Neither of them work at all, or do anything at all. And Arcana and Religion are probably the least useful when you have no other dialogue skills to take, although we could still take, like, Deception and Intimidation, because that only gets us up to +1s thanks to our 8 charisma. So maybe it's actually, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe it's actually better to do it that way. But I think just to maximize to minimize the incidence of taking skills that might actually help, we're going to take these 2. For our cantrip selection, of course, we need to make sure we have no combat cantrips in the early game, so we want to take utility cantrips, but since we only have 8 charisma, we can take some combat cantrips because we'll always miss when we use them. So it's not the end of the world if we're forced to take some combat cantrips. We're going to start, I think, with Light and Dancing Lights. Those are both very good utility spells, but they at least don't increase our combat power at all. And then what we take after that is a little more difficult, because we're starting to run out of non-combat spells that we can take. We're going to grab True Strike. We already have advantage on attack rolls from Tides of Chaos, and also it wouldn't be a video of mine if we didn't grab True Strike for the haters. And then for our last one, I think we're going to go ahead and take Poison Spray. This will almost always miss, because it's only, and it also forces us to be in melee range, or at least very close to melee range, and because we only have 8 charisma, Poison Spray is going to miss extremely regularly. For our 2 spells, we need to take spells that don't do anything in combat if at all possible. So let's go ahead and grab Featherfall, which, while again moderately useful outside of combat, doesn't do anything for us in combat. And then our second spell is a little more difficult. It's actually somewhat hard to find spells that won't contribute anything. So I think for this build, we're just going to take Charm Person. While that will make us slightly better at conversation skills, our charisma skills are so abysmal that Charm Person won't matter in conversation. And enemies will never fail the save against this, and even if they do, it's not very good. So Charm Person is probably the second pick here. Alright, so that's our level 1 build of the worst possible character. Let's get on to level 2. Notice that we have 5 hit points, so a stray breeze will knock us right over. And that will only get worse from here, relatively speaking. We go up to 8 hit points at level 2, a massive increase. And then we get to take an additional spell. Here we're going to take, I think, Disguise Self. It is useful in some circumstances and can help us bypass dialogue checks, but we are running out of spells that do absolutely nothing in combat, so Disguise Self, I think, is going to be the least useful for combat. And then for meta magic, we are going to take Careful Spell. We're not going to take any spells with saving throws, so we will never be able to use Careful Spell, or at least no AoE spells with saving throws, so we're never going to be able to use this. And then similarly, we're going to take Extended Spell, because we're never going to take spells that apply conditions, so we're never going to be able to use that either. At Sorcerer level 3, we have access to a few more spells, and we are again looking for spells that don't do anything. Let's go ahead and grab, where even is it? See Invisibility. I think that one is probably the least useful for us at this point. And then for our meta magic, we have a few more options, but let's go ahead and take Subtle Spell so that we can cast spells while silenced. Unfortunately, we don't have access to silence, and this is also very rarely useful, so we'll pick that one up as well. Character level 4, we get our first feat, and feat selection for the worst possible character is honestly pretty fascinating. There's a few feats in the game that we can take without improving our character at all. So the very first one that we're going to take is Dungeon Delver. In the current patch, Dungeon Delver is bugged and does literally nothing. It does not function at all, so we can take that and not improve our character in the slightest. Having taken Dungeon Delver, it's as though we had taken 0 feats. For our additional cantrip selection here, we are going to go ahead and take Shocking Grasp. That is another melee cantrip that forces us to be in melee, but of course with 8 charisma we're never going to land that, so it will basically never be useful to us. And then for our spell selection here, we are going to take Dark Vision, which, just like See Invisibility, is extremely situational at best. Sorcerer level 5, we're going to take, we get access to 3rd level spells, and we are actually going to go all the way in Sorcerer, because the more levels of Sorcerer we take, the less, obviously, we aren't going to want a level of Wizard, because then we could learn spells from scrolls. And we don't want to take other classes, because then we'd get proficiencies from them, or better hit points. So the more levels of Sorcerer we take, we do need to find more and more useless spells. But luckily, as we level up, there's a few at each level that allow us to take useless spells. Here we're going to go ahead and take Gaseous Form, which is essentially useless in Baldur's Gate. Doesn't give us anything for combat anyways, and obviously is not a spell that you want to know because you can duplicate its effect pretty easily. Sorcerer level 6, we do get Bend Luck, which unfortunately is very good. This is a very powerful ability, but so it effectively gives us a few casts per day of guidance, and also works on attack rolls, so it's like we have Bardic Inspiration. Unfortunately, this is the price we pay for being Wild Magic Sorcerer, as we get one very good ability, but at least we didn't get any very powerful level 1 abilities, and also, with 20 hit points, the chances of us making it to level 6 are slim at best, I would say. For our spell selection here, we are going to go back to level 1 and grab Sleep. At this point in the game, you will never face enemies that have 24 hit points, so we can safely pick up Sleep and have it do absolutely nothing. And then for our 4th level spell selection, again there's a couple 4th level spells that are quite bad, or at least very, very situational. Stuff like Dimension Door and Dominate Beast are very situational, but ideally we're looking for spells that are completely useless, that give us no advantages. At this point we can go back to level 1 and we can take Color Spray, because again, 33 hit points worth of enemies is not going to show up at this level, so we should be able to pick up Color Spray relatively safely and have it never come up in actual combats. The one downside of this is that the 1 turn duration does work with Extended Spell, so we are getting a spell that we can boost with Extended Spell, which is a little sad, but still, we won't be able to trigger this very often, and even if we do, it's only a medium powerful effect. Level 8, we get another feat, and we're going to go all the way down here, and we're going to pick up Performer. That's why we took 8 Charisma, because we can take Performer, gaining only 1 Charisma, and get Musical Instrument Proficiency, which has no mechanical benefits, mostly, while not increasing our Charisma bonus at all, so we still are stuck with 9 Charisma. For our spell selection at this level, I think we are going to take Dominate Beast. It is extremely situational, and the enemies will never fail saving throws against us, even in the fights where there are beasts, so this is probably the weakest spell that we have remaining. At level 9, we get access to an all-time banger of a terrible spell, Seeming, which lets us disguise our entire party, but at the cost of a 5th level spell. So this is one advantage of going all the way to level 9 in Sorcerers. We get access to one of the worst spells in the game. And then at Sorcerer level 10, we get access to another cantrip. And now, unfortunately, we do at this point have to take a ranged combat cantrip, because Mage Hand and Minor Illusion are just too good. And Friends also has a bunch of utility. So let's go ahead and take Acid Splash. With the 9 Charisma that we have, Acid Splash will almost never do any damage, and it has very little utility, so it's not going to... It has very little utility. It's not going to cause enemies to, slip and fall on ice surfaces or let us set things on fire. There's some confusion about this spell, by the way. I see this sometimes in my spell tier list. Acid Splash does not create an acid puddle, so you can't get the minus armor from it. Unlike Chromatic Orb. At level 5, we are going to take... for this spell level, we have access to more 5th level spells. We could take Dominate Person, because it's very bad, just like Dominate Beast, but there's a lot more persons than there are beasts that we're going to have to fight. So we're probably going back to a lower level to look for a spell that doesn't do much. And we can probably, at this point, fairly safely take Detect Thoughts. Detect Thoughts will... a lot of the people that you are talking to by this point in the game are immune to Detect Thoughts anyways, and also Detect Thoughts is mostly only useful if you're good at conversation, which we emphatically are not. For our Meta Magic feat, we are going to go ahead and take... This one's actually somewhat tricky. We could take a Distant Spell, but that does make our spells a little easier to land. I think Distant Spell is still worse for us than Heightened Spell. Quickened and Twinned are obviously just too good to take, even though we don't have any great spells to use with them. They're just still too powerful. I think Distant Spell is going to give us the least value, although it does mean that we can Distant Spell Shocking Grasp, but since that will almost never hit thanks to our 9 Charisma, I don't think that will matter that much. Heightened Spell makes it too easy for us to land, like Dominate Beast, I guess, is our only saving throw spell at this point. So maybe we should pick that up. But I think Heightened Acid Splash is better than Distant Trocking Grasp. So we're going to take Distant Spell. As you can see, there's some like interesting things that we have to think about at this point when you're trying to avoid giving yourself any advantages, and I'm kind of working out in real time how we can avoid giving ourselves any benefits at all. Controlled Chaos is pretty powerful, again, against enemy spellcasters, but I don't think that Wild Magic Surges on the whole benefit us, so this is something that we still don't really want, because anytime, like, the everybody takes damage, for example, is just very bad for this character, so it's something that we want to avoid. For our 6th level spell selection, we can go back to level 1, and we're gonna now take... I was thinking of taking False Life, but that is such a huge portion of our actual HP, right? This would be 1/5 of our HP if we have access to False Life. On the other hand, there's scrolls and stuff of False Life, so this is relatively easily duplicated. But maybe there's something worse we can take. Enlarge Reduce is a sometimes useful party buff, so we don't want to take that. Grant Flight at this point is not amazing, but is still relevant sometimes. Dimension Door does come up in some encounters. As you can see, this is something that I stress a lot. The game is actually pretty good about having your spells do stuff, so even the worst spell selection, it's hard to avoid having spells that do anything at all. I think to make things as hard on ourselves as possible, the right pick here is going to be False Life. Even though it is good at boosting your hit points, that's an effect that you can get from scrolls or other sources of temporary hit points. So this won't stack with other things if you're trying to boost this character's hit point total, and so I think this is going to be the least useful possible spell. There's a couple other options here, but I think this one will come up the least often. Finally, at Sorcerer level 12, we get access, we're going to take, as our last spell, and the crowning glory of this character, Arcane Gate. There are some encounters where this does stuff, but I think it's really funny that we do get to take a 6th level spell and have it not impact our combat power basically at all. So we're going to grab Arcane Gate, and then for our feat, we are going to take Ritual Caster, and we're going to pick up Speak with Dead and Speak with Animals. At this point in the game, now that we're level 12, we won't be doing either of these things very often. And, of course, our charisma skills are so bad that they don't do anything for us most of the time anyways. Also, of course, both of these are very, very easily available from items and potions and so on. Alright, so when you put it all together, this character has 38 hit points. You have 10 AC, actually 9 AC if we take off this armor. Of course, if you put on light armor, you can't cast your spells at all because we have no armor proficiencies, and we have as poor as possible AC and saving throws. Our saving throws are very bad as well. Our wisdom saves we do have a +4 to wisdom, but at least for con and dexterity, we have very weak saving throws. Sorcerers do get con save proficiency, but that is something that we unfortunately cannot avoid, and at least we never get higher than a +3 to our saves on any of our important saves, so we're going to fail every save anyways. We have melee attacks that hit at +2 for +2 damage, thanks to our 15 strength, but other than that cannot contribute in combat at all, thanks to our extremely poor spell selection. Overall, I think that this character is going to be as difficult as possible to win Baldur's Gate with, and if anyone wants to make the attempt, definitely let me know how it goes. I think that would be very funny. You can probably make this character even worse with items. Obviously, putting on armor prevents you from casting spells at all, but things like the Risky Ring could give enemies advantage on every attack against you, and that would also make your character much more difficult to play. So there's even funnier things that you can do with itemization, but the goal here is just to make the build that's as hard to win with as possible, and I think this is it. Alright, my friends, I hope that you enjoyed this slightly goofy take on a Baldur's Gate build, just something different to mix it up for April Fool's Day. And as always, if you've enjoyed the video, please feel free to leave a comment, like the video, and you can subscribe to my channel for more of this and other strategy game analysis. Most of the time we're trying to do things well, but this was a fun deviation. Alright, my friends, Cheers, I'll catch you next time.